Li Bai, farewell at a wine shop in Jingling. Wind blows the willows and fills the shop with fragrance. Woo girls bringing wine and urge their guests to drink. All my friends in Jingling have come to say farewell. It is time to go, but I won't till every cup is empty. I ask you, friends, as the water flows east, which is longer, our sadness or this river? So, yet another poem by Li Bai, and as opposed to the two previous ones, this is a pretty short one. This is only one, two, three couplets, total of 6 lines. So this poem also, if the previous ones with their Taoist deities and their mountain roaming connect us with one of the main strains of Li Bai's poetry, landscape poetry, Taoistic topics and imagery, this poem connects with another very typical, very common topic, at least in the traditional view of Li Bai, which is Bacchic poetry, drinking alcohol, which became, a stereotype for the less Confucian, the more Taoistically inclined, and the more materialistic and bon vivant poets who didn't think so much of writing poetry as an exercise in social morality or of complaining at the evils of the world, and more they had a more evasive and Epicurean attitude. So, very short poem. Topics of this poem. The main one is parting, which is, as you know, a common fare, a very common staple in Chinese poetry. And a secondary topic, which we've already mentioned and is quite important, is drinking wine, the Bacchic pleasures of drinking wine together with other people. A couple of things about it. So, farewell at a wine shop in Jingling. Jinling, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the informal names that was given to a city in the south of China in the Yangtze River Valley that later became Nanjing, one of the greatest cities in South China and a capital for some periods. Before the Tang Dynasty, that place had been a capital. After the Tang Dynasty, it would become a capital a couple of times. At the Tang Dynasty, it was a very minor, recently rebuilt town. It's in the area of Zhejiang, as I say, in the southeast of China, where Li Bai spent his final years. Now, this takes place in a wine shop, so I find that there is a contrast, I don't know if intended or not, between other poems of parting in which the scholar official in the capital organizes a party for his friends before leaving, and this party in a tavern, which certainly feels a little bit less serious than the scholar official party at the capital that I've just mentioned, and that we've encountered in some of the poems in this book. I think it was Li Qi's farewell to Cheng Zhangfu, which referred to that world of scholars partying and partying and parting. So maybe this is, I'm not sure, it might have an ironic or a parodic element of those poems. Maybe not. What else can we say about this very brief poem before going bit by bit? Well, I think that's it, really. Remember the importance of wine drinking in Chinese culture, especially in Li Bai's poetic persona, in Li Bai's poetic image. I would suspect that this poem was an impromptu composition. I mean, it's a short poem. It seems to be talking of what's happening while the poem is being composed, so it might have been an improvised verse that a poetic genius like Li Bai would have been able to compose in the context, in the situation. So let's go with the different couplets then. Wind blows the willows and fills the shop with fragrance. Woo girls bring wine and urge their guests to drink. So the first couplet, there's no reference to the season, but from the fact that the wind is blowing in the willows, we might guess that this is spring, which is the typical season wherein willows are mentioned. So the wind is blowing, and I am not aware that willow flowers have any fragrance at all. So I'm not sure with so the wind is blowing through the willows. The shop is full. The wine shop is full of fragrance, but is it the fragrance from the willows? I'm not sure they emit an aroma, but if it's not the willows, other spring flowers that are flowering right now. Anyway, we get a nice wind in spring and a lovely scent in the tavern. And accompanying this nice oral background, Bacchic poetry, symposiac situation, woo girls bring wine and urge their guests to drink. So woo girls, the region where Jingling was situated had been the epicenter of the old Chinese kingdom, the old Chinese state of Wu. And the women from the state of Wu had a reputation for being very beautiful and slightly exotic for the more northern Chinese people of the Yellow River Valley. In fact, during the period of disunion, a whole genre of poems from Wu girls, from Wu ladies, from sing-song dancers from the south developed. Here we might imagine that they're pretty waitresses, serving wine to the different men participating in this party. So Wu girls, and probably translating this image for us would be something like, for a Galician, for a northerner like me, imagining a drinking party in an Andalusian tavern, maybe in Seville, with the typical southern beauties of Spain, dark-eyed, dark-haired, tanned skins. So something like that. So conviviality. The first couplet, quite happy, nice smells, nice drinking. Next couplet. All my friends in Jingling have come to say farewell. It is time to go, but I won't till every cup is empty. So we get back to the title of the poem. We already, in the first couplet, the being at the wine shop part was underlined. Now the fact that this is a farewell party in Jingling is the one that is underlined. All Levi's local friends have come. They're saying goodbye, drinking together, and the party atmosphere keeps going on. And Levi, at least in this translation, in this version, seems to be implying that although it's time to go, the night is still young, the party's not over yet. He's going to drink each and every cup and probably get blind drunk in the process. Last couplet. I ask you, friends, as the water flows east, which is longer, our sadness or this river? So the poem finishes with a melancholy, sad note, something that Levi tells to his friends, and in the very characteristic Levi hyperbole, a rhetorical question is made. Levi asks his friends, as the water flows east, so as the water flows east, in front of Jingling flowed the Yangtze River, and it flowed in an eastern direction. Now, this is characteristic of Chinese rivers, by the way, which is very different from our rivers. In China, because of the big mass of mountains in the west and in the Tibetan plateau, the big rivers flow from the west to the east. In fact, in Chinese legends, this was explained by stating that in the old past, the world was sustained over 4 columns, and some gods fought, and they partly knocked off one of those columns, the one in the east or southeastern direction, and that is why the earth tilts in that direction and the rivers go in that direction. So I think it's also an idiom or a typical expression in classical Chinese. The water flows east for something that is inevitable, for something that is obvious, self-evident. So Levi would be saying, I ask you, friends, as it is plain to see, but at the same time he is evoking the water imagery, which continues in the next line, and the river imagery, the flowing waters as a metaphor for life, going towards death. He says, which is longer, our sadness or this river? So, of course, this is a hyperbole because we're not talking about any river here. We're talking about the Yangtze, which is one of the biggest and longest rivers in the planet. So, so through this hyperbole, Levi is probably exaggerating a bit, but he is putting the emphasis on the fact that our sadness at parting is immense, immeasurable, yeah, boundless like the sea or like this enormous river. So a nice poem, a bit conventional, I think. It doesn't feel very deep, or the images aren't very deep. Also, it looks like a typical convivial, spontaneous piece that Levi would conjure for an appropriate social occasion. So, okay, it's not a bad poem. A bit short, quite easy to picture. To conclude, just a couple of notes about some aspects of translation. We've mentioned before that the Chinese classical language is very, 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 very compact and Spartan. Never one character too much. Yeah, there's an aesthetic appreciation of ambiguity and of writing the minimal possible number of characters, of compactness, if you will. And again, the Chinese language, and especially the classical language, makes very, very seldom use of pronouns. The verbs make no indication of tense or of number or of person, which means some lines can be translated in many different ways. So, for example, the second line, "Woo girls bring wine," many translators have translated for one woman, because the original poem says "woo girl," the two characters there, "woo girl." So it could be many women because it's a party. You can imagine that it's a party, but it could be one. He is thinking of one person, maybe the woman that is serving the wine directly to him. Also, the fourth line, yeah, "It is time to go, but I won't till every cup is empty." In this translation, which is by Geoffrey Waters, it seems to imply that Levi is rather jokingly saying, the party's not over until I drink each and every drink. Other translations have put the emphasis on everybody is drinking, not just Levi. It says those traveling, not travel. In fact, in the original Chinese, the heptasyllabic line here would be word by word. People traveling, not traveling, each one exhaust feast. So it sounds more like everybody. Those of you, me, myself, who is leaving, and you who are not leaving, we have to enjoy the feast to the utmost and drink, all of us. So, I think the original points more to the group drinking. So quite a nice little poem, quite nice. And tomorrow we will continue with the last of the heptasyllabic gushi by Levi.